absolutely. So why don't we dive right into it here? So Jim Harbaugh was talking about that this is going to be obviously a state championship game. Tough matchup. They always say throw the book out when it's a rivalry. So with Michigan favored, obviously this is I believe it's the first time ever that this game has been held at Spartan Stadium under the lights at night. So walk me through kind of just that dynamic from your perspective.
I think it's a cool thing for the fans to experience. Like you said, this is the first time ever that Spartan Stadium's hosting this game under the lights. Unfortunately, it might not end up being a very competitive game. But as you mentioned, a lot of the times with this rivalry, you can throw things like records and stats out the window when it comes to this game. I really don't know if that'll be the case this year or not with the directions that these teams are going. But
Right.
I still think, it's a unique setting. It's still going to draw a big television audience. It's, going to definitely be something that people are going to want to watch just because, as you mentioned, as Harbaugh said, it's like a state championship game. Michigan State interim head coach Harlan Barnett said it's the best rivalry in college football. So, there's always going to be an appetite for this game. It's a heated rivalry, and one way or the other, people are going to enjoy it, one fan base or the other. So we'll see.
Yeah, I anticipate that that emotions are going to be high, and in fact, you may actually see for the first time this season the starters kept in no matter what, because that is something they may want to do. We know I'm not saying anything we don't already know. There were some events that happened last year, and there's probably going to be some emotions based on that. So you may actually have like JJ McCarthy, Blake Corum, Will Johnson, and these players like asking to stay in the entire time. So could be interesting. So kind of going into the offense for you guys on that side of the ball. We know that there's been some quarterback changes. Noah Kim being the starting quarterback for decent chunk, and then Kattenhauser getting his opportunity to start. We saw that he went 18 for 29, 133 yards with 2 touchdowns. It's actually not bad. So what do you think he's going to have another opportunity? And what do you see in this offense now with him under center?
Yeah, Hauser's definitely going to start this game, as long as nothing weird happens with a practice injury or something like that. But yeah, so, both Barnett and offensive coordinator Jay Johnson spoke today. They liked what they saw from Hauser in that game against Rutgers. Obviously, it wasn't anything spectacular. I think the big thing was that he didn't turn the football over, which was a big issue with Noah Kim, in the 3 games previously. And Hauser did have a couple of close calls against Rutgers. It was a wet, sloppy conditions. He fumbled at one point, recovered his own fumble, and then he almost threw a couple near interceptions. But on the stat sheet, he didn't turn the ball over, so that was good. He didn't throw for a lot of yards, as you mentioned, 133. But he was fairly efficient, fairly decent completion percentage. Maybe like to see a little more zip on some of his throws, but again, the conditions were not favorable to really throw the ball in that game. He also had a rushing touchdown in addition to the 2 touchdowns he threw. He was moving the offense, really well for 3 quarters until everything kind of collapsed in the 4th quarter for the team. But overall, I think the Michigan State coaches, I think the players, around him support him. They were encouraged by what they saw from him. The thing with Hauser was always that he had sky high potential. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, big high school program out there in California at St. John Bosco. So, talent with him has never been the issue. It's more about getting reps, getting experience, and getting into a rhythm. Obviously he wasn't going to be perfect in his first start, and I don't think people really had those kind of expectations for him. But at the same time, fans need to understand that it'll take patience. As he plays more, as he gets more into a rhythm, he starts to settle in, I think he can do some really good things. He has a really, really tough matchup this weekend against that Michigan defense. So we'll see how that goes. But overall, I think you can expect Hauser to start the rest of the year as long as he stays healthy. And Noah Kim's actually dealing with an injury too. That's not why he was benched. Hauser was going to start either way, but actually,
Right.
true freshman Sam Levitt would have been the backup quarterback. Had something happen to Hauser against Rutgers. That's what Barnett said after the game on Saturday, and Johnson kind of reiterated that today in his comments. So that they're kind of monitoring Noah Kim. He's kind of day to day, but either way, Hauser's going to be starting.
So one question that kind of looking at this, and I heard that too about the injury, but that it wasn't going to impact anything either way. One thing is that Rutgers, I think, did a very good job of stopping the run for you guys, and I think that the pass game looked semi decent. You had the pass to Foster in the first drive. You had the pass to Trey Mosley. There were some good moments, but then on the kind of the run side, what do you think needs to happen? Maybe from a play calling perspective, or just different game planning to really get that run game going.
Yeah, I don't know if most fans really pay attention to Rutgers, but they actually have a really good defense and defensive front, and a
We
lot of
know.
yeah. Michigan's already played them, so they have a good defensive front. A lot of teams struggle to run the ball on them, but Nate Carter's had a really good year running the football. He's a UConn transfer. There were a lot of really good things said about him throughout spring ball and stuff like that. And he's really been as advertised for the most part. But Rutgers did do a good job of shutting him down. Obviously, it's not all on the running back. You need the offensive line. You need the tight ends blocking. You need the receivers blocking on the outside. That's a big thing the Michigan State coaching staff kind of preaches, is that it takes all 11 to have a successful play, especially in the run game when everybody needs to be blocking. So that's one thing that the offensive line has really kind of struggled with this year, is consistency and run blocking. They've been pretty good in pass protection, but they need to do a better job in the run game and on the outside with the tight ends and the receivers too. So Jalen Berger, who was Michigan State's leading rusher last year, and he dealt with some injuries early on this year. But he was pretty active against Rutgers, and he had decent yard per carry and was able to get to the outside and get some chunk plays a couple times. So that there were some plays where they were able to hit at a decent rate, get some chunk yardage. But for the most part, Carter's still going to be that workhorse back for you. And like I said, it really all comes down to execution and the blocking, and being able to be more physical than the other team. And that's something that should be really worrisome for Michigan State against that Michigan defensive front this week. It's something they have to emphasize.
Absolutely. And then obviously, Michigan has kind of been starting to put it together. Traditionally, Michigan's been thought of as a defensive team, right? And that has gone back decades. But obviously, with JJ under center, the defense is going to be a question for you guys, like how to contain a quarterback that can run, that can pass. That obviously you have some really good running backs. So from a defensive side, who should we be looking out for as playmakers?
Yeah, so Michigan State's going to rotate a lot of different guys along the defensive line. In the interior, Simeon Barrow is a guy who's really stepped up as a leader. And Derek Harmon, you might see next to him, or Maverick Hansen, or Jalen Sami, or all these different guys. And on the edges, you might see Zion Young, Tumishe Adelaide, and they might also kick inside at times on obvious passing downs. Avery Dunn, Brandon Wright, Chris Bogle. There's a lot of different guys that they throw around on that defensive line, but Michigan State's got to do a little bit better job of getting to the quarterback and getting pressure. They had a few sacks against Rutgers, and honestly, the defense played really well in that game for 3.5 quarters, outside of that last drive where Rutgers was able to, or last two drives, I should say. But on that last drive, Rutgers was able to run the clock out, and there were still 7 minutes left on the clock. But against Iowa and against Rutgers, and even in the second half against Maryland, there were a lot of encouraging signs from the defense at the linebacker level. Jacoby Windman, who's a team leader, he's out for the year with an injury. So a true freshman who's really stepped up is Jordan Hall, four-star kid. Already looked at pretty much as a team leader. He's the only three-time captain in IMG Academy history in high school. Really great kid, really great family. Somebody who's really stepped up. And then, obviously Cale Halliday is a mainstay at the linebacker level, and Aaron Brule, and you're going to see a lot of these different guys rotate in and out there too. And of course, in the secondary, you got Dylan Tatum, Chance Rucker is another true freshman who's really been stepping up, especially Charles Brantley's been out with an injury, so he stepped into the starting lineup. He had his first career interception last week against Rutgers. And he probably still has to work on things like physicality and stuff like that, but overall he's been pretty solid to be getting thrown into games like that. The safeties are young but good, and Malik Spencer, he came out of that Rutgers game for a while with an injury, but he returned, and Jaden Mingham's the other one out back there. So yeah, there's a lot of names to watch out for, a lot of different guys that they're going to rotate in and out.
So definitely watch out for that. A lot of rotation, it sounds like. So I asked this of everybody, and that includes Rutgers Wire. I asked this of our Indiana guy last week. I ask it to everybody, and I think this is actually the most serious I've ever asked it. Is how does Michigan State win this game? I think it's definitely a more serious question than when I asked the Indiana guy. What do you think needs to be the case for that to happen?
Yeah, that's a tough one. On paper, this looks like a terrible matchup for Michigan State. But again, a lot of weird things have happened in this rivalry. You never know. I think they're really going to use that underdog mentality and chip on their shoulder to this game. And as you mentioned, we all know what happened last year. And, there's a lot of obviously built up animosity and things. Michigan State, even though they've lost 4 games in a row, the really frustrating part is that they've been close, and that's what Harlan Barnett keeps preaching, is that, in a lot of those games, they beat themselves with turnovers, with untimely penalties, with, just miscues, even some poor coaching decisions, to be honest. But once they're able to put that together, they outgained Iowa, they outgained Maryland, they have more first downs than Rutgers. They dominated 3 quarters against Rutgers, so it's just for them a matter of putting together 4 quarters. Obviously, not turning the ball over, because that's obviously a killer. And the penalties have been an issue too, and they've had some unique ways to try to fix those, like having refs at practice and recording who was penalized, and then having them come up in team meetings and read the definition of a penalty before doing 10 push-ups in front of their teammates. So, they're trying to fix these problems, but
it's tough when you have a coaching transition, though. Like when you're dealing, the coach obviously had his problems, and now you've got an interim coach, and obviously that creates uncertainty and kind of a change in energy all around. So, I think you got to do what you can, really.
Yeah, and Harlan Barnett has done a really good job of kind of keeping the team together throughout this whole Mel Tucker saga. There's only been one kid who's entered the transfer portal. A couple other who are no longer with the team, but for the most part, everybody stayed. Everybody respects Barnett. Obviously, his in-game management and decision making, and the staffs and the play calling and stuff like that, need to upgrade. But as far as how you contain Michigan, that's just such a tall task with to throw Blake Corum at you in the run game, and then the things that JJ McCarthy can do in the passing game, or even with his feet, or then hey, they got Donovan Edwards too, and Roman Wilson, and all these other guys, and so defensively, I think that Michigan's probably going to as they do, try to run the ball. So I think Michigan State has to do the best that it can to neutralize that. But at the same time, then, JJ McCarthy, you can't be letting him throw for a bunch of yardage either. So it's really, this Michigan team, to me, has very few weaknesses, and it's just kind of pick your poison. So you have to limit them in one way or the other. So you focus on that, and then try to contain the other one as best you can. And offensively, I think Michigan State is going to need to lean on Nate Carter more this week, even though he's going up against an elite rushing defense and Jalen Berger. And I don't know if Jaron Mangum will be back this week. He's been out the whole season with an injury, but he's a bigger bruising back. So I think if they have more healthy backs and they're able to throw more at those guys and wear them down, they can't really put this game on Katin Houser's shoulders.
No.
He's earned this job, I think, now to start, given Kim's struggles. And by all accounts, Hauser was just as solid throughout training camp and spring ball and things like that. But they have to ease him in against a team like Michigan. So they're going to have to lean on that running game, even if it's going to be tough sledding. They're going to need to somehow open up short throws and, get Hauser comfortable, get him into a rhythm with quick passes and screens and things like that. Get his confidence up, then take your shot.
And I will say that the articles that you wrote about Harlan Barnett and also Jay Johnson and what they talked about, it was very coach speak when they talked about Michigan. They did the right thing. They just said it's a great challenge, it's a great opportunity, and Harbaugh's doing the same thing on the Michigan side. It's a state championship, tough matchup. Nobody's trying to give the other side any bulletin board material here. So you were there. I mean, is that the general vibe? Is just no disrespect, like do everything possible to not have any disrespect?
Yeah, I mean, Michigan State, their whole coaching staff, even when Tucker was the head coach, coach speak was always kind of the thing there. So you got to take everything that's said with a grain of salt. But I mean, Johnson and Barnett were both very obviously respectful of what this Michigan team is. They praise how balanced they are, how disciplined they are. The different looks that they throw at you. Even Johnson was saying that even though a lot of the same core guys that Michigan had on defense last year when they played them are back, they're still going to do some different things and throw some different things at you. So they have to be prepared for that. But another thing that Johnson was asked about specifically was kind of that underdog mentality and chip on the shoulder thing. And he said that honestly, that can help drive the team, get them motivated. So I don't think, obviously Michigan's been very respectful too, but Michigan State doesn't need any more bulletin board material. Just the history of the rivalry and everything that they already have, all of that in their minds.
Neither team does.
Yeah, and so but Johnson also really praised, and something Barnett's done too, is really just kind of praise how resilient these guys are on the team, because obviously none of them asked for this. None of them asked for their head coach to be fired under these circumstances.
Of course not.
And the staff that's left is just trying to do the best job that they can to get these guys through the season. Like I said, they've been close, but they don't know how to win these Big Ten games yet. And that's something that they have to figure out as a staff, as a team, putting together a four-quarter game and limiting the mistakes that have really hurt them this year, that have cost them games, honestly.
Ryan, I'm going to put you on the spot. I said I was going to do this. So we always at the end do predictions. And I think at the very least, I'd like to get your take on how you think this game's going to go.
Yeah, I just don't see it going very well for Michigan State. Like I said, though, anything can happen in this rivalry. I think it will be a little more competitive than people think. If you remember back to last year's game, Michigan State played really well in that first half, and they really limited Michigan, forced a lot of field goals. They let them drive down the field a lot, but they didn't let them get into the end zone too often. But the offense wasn't able to muster much last year, and everybody talks about too how Michigan hasn't really been tested yet. They haven't played any top team, but to me, I don't think it matters who this Michigan team plays outside of maybe like Georgia, Ohio State. Like, not a lot of teams are going to be competitive with them. So basically, I'm predicting that something around a final score of Michigan 31, Michigan State 10, something, where Michigan kind of controls the clock, doesn't, not like an incredible blowout, but a very, steady win for them.
So we're not as far apart as I thought we'd be, because I've got it at 42-10. And the only reason that I think it's going to be 42-10 is because Michigan State will have a good enough defense to hold Michigan down, and they're going to keep their starters in the whole game to result in 42. I think that's probably what's going to happen. But and then of course we've got all the other ones rolling in from we've got everything from 45-0 to 38-7. All kinds of interesting predictions here.
Can't rule any of that out, to be honest.
I'm waiting for the Ohio State Buckeye troll to say Michigan State 45-7. I'm waiting for it. Hasn't happened yet, but every night, every
If
time
that
there's
happened, I'd
somebody.
be very surprised, but you never know.
So Ryan, I really appreciate you coming by. Could you please tell everybody where they can find your work, where they can follow you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find our work at SpartansIllustrated.com or MichiganState.Rivals.com. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan O'Bleness, RyanObleness. You can find Spartans Illustrated on Twitter at Spartans Rivals.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, thanks for stopping by. I'm going to go ahead and move on to calls, but we'll definitely clip this and send it out to the universe. So we really appreciate you, Ryan, stopping by.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Ryan. All right. With that said, we thank Ryan for taking the time, of course, to be here. We're going to move on to calls now and really kind of keep talking through Michigan State and some other topics as well. We're starting out with Mike Fort is in the house. Mike, welcome back, man. Go Blue.
Go Blue, John. What's up?
Not much. So we just heard the Michigan State take on things, and I was actually surprised at how close our predictions were. I thought he would have it closer, at least.
You both had him going double digits on us, though.
Yeah.
Well, my reason
10.
reason for 45-0 is that Washington basically shut them out in East Lansing, with the exception of a garbage time touchdown at the very end of the game. And if you were to put me on a spot and say, is Michigan's defense better or is Washington's defense better, I would say Michigan.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Although I hate to bring this up, but I need to see us against Penn State, and then I can really make that judgment call.
Well, I don't think we're going to hold Penn State to 10 points. I mean, just compared to Washington, Oregon got 30 plus points on Washington, so you don't have to be a lights out defense, but Washington's defense is increased from last year, but it's still not top 20 in my opinion. But they basically shut out Michigan State, so that's my litmus test. Same reason why I said Penix threw for almost 500 yards against these guys, so I'm expecting JJ and not to get 500 yards, but pass it will, because Michigan State's secondary is horrible, and it's been horrible for a few years now.
What do you think about the idea of keeping the starters in the whole game?
It's kind of twofold. On one hand, I like the idea, because if there's any team you really want to run the score up on, it's Michigan State, given what happened last year.
Yeah.
Conversely, I don't want the starters to play too much because of last year.
Yeah.
And I think it's mainly because, kind of a offshoot, in high school, my football team was terrible. And I mean, just fantastically terrible. And I went to a game on the road, it was like 10 minutes down the road from me. It was an away game for us, and we were down, I think it was like 45-0. I mean, pitiful. And one of the guys in the fourth quarter, he basically just said, well, we might as well win at something. And he took another guy's helmet off, ripped it off him, and just didn't beat him with the helmet, but he just started punching at him. It's like, I'm kind of worried that Michigan State might do something that similar, because I've lost all I've lost all respect for that team after last year. I mean, I think they've showed their mentality, and I'm worried that
Yeah.
they might get down 38-3 and just say, okay, well, we might as well just put this into a big brawl. And I don't want the possibility of any major key players for us being injured because Michigan State just started thug balling it.
Well, we have another caller, and I want to get Moose's perspective on this as well. Moose, welcome
What
back
up?
to Michigan Wolverines Live. Go Blue.
Go Blue. What's up, guys?
Hey, what's up?
Yeah. Hey, we're just talking Michigan State and
You
what
know-
we think about keeping the starters in for a while, or because the way I see it, I think JJ and Blake and especially some of the seniors, they're going to want to stay in as long as they can, and just impose their will. I think there's going to be that mentality. So it's going to be on the coaching to be like, okay, guys, time to go. Like, time to rest now. Like, unlike against Indiana where nobody cared, this game they're not going to want to get out. So like, it's going to be on the coaching to be strong about benching them.
I don't know, guys. Usually I'm pretty hyped up for a rivalry game, when it's rivalry week or whatever. But I don't know, man. This year it just doesn't feel the same, does it? It just feels like this is going to be a blowout. It's not even going to be close. Like I don't even see it being competitive.
Me either.
Well, I thought 2016 was going to be a blowout after trouble with the snap, and then they kept it much closer than we thought. And obviously, we had the Jabril Peppers taking it the other way for 2 at the end, which was a little bit satisfying, but still much closer than I expected that year.
Well, John, this is I don't say this too often, but we've had some pretty good Michigan teams in the past. But I gotta tell you, I think this is the best Michigan team I've ever seen, and I truly mean that.
Wow.
And I will say this: D'Antonio's worst team is much better than anything that's going to be on the field this Saturday.
That's fair.